Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our press conference this morning, which I guess the topic you would know already, or you can guess. And, you know, it's a very difficult morning for all of us here at the Democratic Labour Party, as you will understand. But this conference is convened to share the outrage of all rational Barbadians. All rational Barbadians who are disgusted and disappointed. And we are here to express that disgust and disappointment on behalf of the people of Barbados. Today, with me, I have on the far left, Mrs. Melissa Savory Gittins, who is the chairperson of the Women's League. Next to her, in the center, we have the chairperson of the Young Democrats, Ms. Tyra Trotman. And on my immediate left, I have Ms. Felicia Dujon, who is our third vice president and our children's advocate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this morning is going to be a no-holds-barred press conference. We have nothing to hide. We have all to share. And we are here as Barbadians who are empathetic, because you have to be empathetic to be a good leader. You also have to be able to speak truth to power as good leaders. And today I present to you our good leaders. So ladies, I hand the ball and the bat and everything else on the pitch to you.
Thank you, comrade. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today would have been a day that we would have been speaking quite a lot on International Girls' Day, which occurred yesterday. But here we are, where we are going to be discussing the issues that affect women, the issues that affect girls, in particular, violence towards women and violence towards girls. It is very alarming that the state in this matter enacted some form of violence on children, in particular girls. And for this matter, we believe that this government has to take every responsibility for what occurred yesterday. We reiterate that we stand with parents. We understand how you feel, because as a parent myself, I don't know how I would feel if my child calls me and tells me that there are criminals with weapons at their school. How I would respond to such a matter, given the nature of violence within our communities, within our homes, and now we're enacting it within our schools. What we need to do is to ensure that this government understands what parental rights are, that they do not have the responsibility nor the right to infringe on any parental rights, nor children's rights. This is a government who was adamant that they would have passed the bill that violated the rights of parents. However, we're seeing what is happening today. This is another example of the same government not upholding the rights of parents and engaging in actions that removes the parent from enacting in the best interest of the child. Those responsible thought it was in the best interest of the child to endure such a traumatic experience. And again, we are getting government officials and government representatives telling us that it is best to put our children under traumatic experiences than to do what they are required to do, that is, to do their job, to ensure that there are clear policies on security in schools, to ensure that there are proactive school safety strategies that can work in the benefit of children, teachers, auxiliary staff, and anyone that is on school premises. We ought to remember that for many of those children, the school is the only safe ground for them. We do not know what homes those children are coming from. We do not know what their communities look like. and the school is the only safe haven for some of those children. And for the Ministry of Education to again respond as if those children, oh, they will just get some counseling and they should be okay. It is a detriment to the health, the mental health of those children. And another aspect of this government, this incompetent government, is the fact that they develop policies without clear data, without clear empirical evidence to show that such stimulations and drills actually work. Because we don't know what research are they talking about, but it has been shown, and if they have been doing their research, they would have seen that the majority of research have shown that it has devastating impact on children. And the research is showing that most schools are moving away from such stimulation interventions. So the reality is that, what are we going to think about? Are we going to think that we're supposed to tarnish the reputation of this country again when we are dealing with our children? How we are going to protect our children? Do we believe that we must continue to enact violence as a way to teach children how to be safe in schools? By using violence? By using men with callings to run behind children in schools? Clearly, this is not the type of government that thinks about the mental health of our children. So the reality is that we do not need those kinds of stimulations within schools. What we need is governments and ministers and CEOs of education to think of holistic ways to teach children how to be safe in their surroundings and not to have wild men running in the schools with Collins and mock guns. What messages are we sending to our children? How our children are going to recover? Do we understand what those traumatic experiences mean? Some of those experiences go out through adulthood. How are we going to deal with such matters within our society? So the reality is, and that we know, that they're having a press conference today with the CEO, the principal of the school, and the police, and perhaps the fire officers. The reality is that such drills, and that has been shown in research, are done by the police officers and in some cases firemen. And when those drills are being done, they do not consider or take in consideration the emotional harm that it endures. So the reality is that we as educators should have considered the rights of children, should have considered the rights of parents. And again, for parents, we stand with you, because the reality is we warned you about this Minister of Education. A year ago with the IDB survey, we warned you that these are government officials that do not take the interests of children at heart. Because anyone who thought about a child would never consider having men, masked men, run through a school environment with weapons. So it clearly shows that those individuals are not taking into consideration the emotional and psychological harm of children. And so, as we said, the Prime Minister, this is your responsibility. The buck stops at your doorstep. How long will parents have to continue to think twice about sending their children to school?
Thanks very much, Comrade Dujon. I don't know that I need to add anything more here, but I am now asking Comrade Trotman to give the perspective of the young people within the Democratic Labour Party and the young people within Barbados.
Good morning, Barbados. The effect of what occurred at the Springer Memorial Secondary School on Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. It brings us, at the Young Democrats, great distress and discomfort. We were yet able to witness another instance of inattentiveness and profound negligence on the part of the insistently problematic Minister of Education, Ms. Kay McConney. It's trite law, which means it's a general principle in law that the actus reus, which is the physical action of an assault, consists of any act which makes the victim fear that unlawful force is about to be used against him or her. No actual force must have been applied. Creating fear is sufficient. So an assault can be constituted where it is that you're yielding weapons, even if they are not real. So you heard Comrade Dujon speak about the mock guns. You heard about her speaking about masked men running through a school with cutlasses. That is enough to constitute the actus reus of an assault, which is a criminal action. So what we witnessed is not a simulation, but rather a criminal act of assault on innocent children of a school, a place where they're supposed to feel safe, a place where they're supposed to flourish and grow and be nourished and be comforted. But instead, you're putting them in a situation where they're fearful for their life and safety. So much so that you've created a state of panic. We had asthmatics catching attacks. We had students and staff fainting. We had persons calling their parents, calling the police. So it was a complete state of disarray. What we also witnessed is the continuous, blatant disrespect and disregard of parents and their parental rights. This event should have never transpired without the knowledge and consent of the parents. We know that persons under 18 cannot legally consent to anything. That is why when you're taking children out of the school and putting them on school trips, you have to get a consent form, which is filled out by a parent or a guardian. So if you're going to undertake such an exercise, parents and guardians of these students should have been informed and their consent should have been received first. Not only that, but the persons who were actually involved, which are the students themselves and the staff, they should have been informed, and not only informed, but trained. A briefing should have been taken place where you sit with them and you say, well, this is what you're supposed to do in an event that this happens, and then warning or notice should have been given that it is on this day that the simulation will occur, so you don't mix up the two. It is very hard for the mind to decipher between a simulation and a real-life event if you are not put on notice first. Section 58 of the Education Act, Cap 41 of the Laws of Barbados, states verbatim, the minister shall, in the exercise of his or her functions under this act, have regard to the general principle that so far as it is compatible with the provision of efficient instruction and training and the avoidance of unreasonable public expenditure, the wishes of parents are to be considered in the education of pupils. That is in the act. So why is it then that parents were not consulted to find out whether or not it is their wish to have their children taking part in such an exercise or simulation, as it was called? Most recently, myself and Comrade Dujon, we attended a meeting before the Select Committee in Parliament, where we debated the Child Protection Bill. And it was the strong position of the government that this bill must be enacted because it is the strongest piece of legislation out there to protect children against abuse and neglect of parents. And I raised the concern that I did not see any sections which address protection of children against the state. And I don't know if it's a coincidence or if I'm philosophical, but I was able to predict an event which has now occurred. Because here we have the state abusing children psychologically and mentally. And now we're faced with a situation where we're given excuses and apologies, but I'm not certain if it will go much further. And that is why I stress the importance of having legislation put in place, or at least sections, that protect children from actions of the state and their actors. Further, when I came across this information, the simulation exercise, I wondered why there was a need for such an exercise in circumstances where we have Minister Corey Lane, who repeatedly boasts about the low crime levels in Barbados. So I don't know if it's a matter of mixed messaging, or if it is that the government of Barbados wishes to push under the rug or hide some very serious situations we have going on in Barbados, which is crime. And if it is that Barbados is in such a state that we need exercises like these in schools, then I think Minister Corey Lane needs to draw back his position on the levels of crime in Barbados. And if it is, because I believe in being prepared, of course, if it is that we are preparing our students for instances like these, then it needs to be done in the correct way. Oftentimes, it's not what we do, but it's how we do it. Finally, I would like to say that we've, as Comrade Dujon already alluded to, we saw the IDB survey situation. Up until now, till this date, there has been no justice served. There's been no vindication. So at this point, an apology is not enough. Excuses, they are not enough. We are calling upon the resignation of the Minister of Education and the Chief Education Officer immediately. We are also calling on the fact that all parties involved at any level at all are dealt with in the most extreme of circumstances. This is our children we are talking about. This is the nation's future we are talking about. This is the mental health of our future. Do you know how traumatic such an experience is? The long-lasting effects of such an experience in your everyday life? It is not acceptable. It should not be excused, and an apology is not enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Trotman. As I said, Comrade Trotman is the chairperson of the Young Democrats. We will now have the chairperson of the Women's League of the Democratic Labour Party, who is also a parent, who will also reinforce that an apology is not enough. They have to go.
Thank you very much. And I would just start there and say an apology is definitely not enough. And the minister, indeed, I think it's time that she hang up her boots and realize that this job is not the job for her. We would have had the incidences of the IDB survey. We would have had the incident at the Dighton Griffith School. And, you know, when I think about that incident alone, it still gives me goosebumps, because when I received the call that morning from a screaming child saying, you know, somebody's on the compound with a weapon, and the screams you're hearing, and even if you weren't a part of that, or you may not have been as aware as you are now about that, but you watch the videos that are being circulated with the incident at Springer Memorial, There's one where you can just hear a child in the background, and you can hear the fear in that child as she's recording what is happening. And then you're hearing children in the background screaming, and somebody's knocking on the door saying, open this door right now. And for me, just listening to that, again, goosebumps just come out on my skin, because the fear that that child was going through, that trauma, that child is not going to live that down. And I'm telling you, this morning I was talking to a parent, and he asked me, have you ever been in a robbery? I said, no, I'm happy for that. He said, I was in a robbery over 10 years ago. And he says, and every time a motorcycle passed him and he hears that back shot, back, he said, he just jumped to the ground. And this is a grown man that is still going through this experience all of these years later. What then do we have to say about a child who is going through something? They don't know what's happening. You're in a space and you're hearing screaming and crying, and you're just hearing hide. Then what? Did we really think this through? Did we really think about how this will really impact a child? And then now, let's take it a bit further to be on the end of that call, where you as a parent get a phone call telling you, somebody on the compound, I need to get out of here. As a parent, you don't know what to do. You drop everything, you're at working, and you receive a phone call. A father called me last night and he said, my wife called me and she said they just received a call from a parent saying to me, go get your child now. And he was like, go get my child what? And then when he heard about what was happening or purported to be happening, he said he dropped everything that he was doing and he rushed to the school. And he said when he got to the school, he was not allowed to collect his child because they were like, I don't know you. So that's another issue I would deal with, the I don't know you issue. But the fact that, and he said when he got there, he saw parents running to the school gate. And he said that alone, like for him, his heart melted. And even relaying the story, I am feeling the emotions of what these parents would have gone through yesterday when they got those phone calls about their children. The child that you birth could be in a situation. And even when you have when your children growing up and they're adult children, you hear something happen to them, it still breaks you. So I could imagine the fear of the parents, the fear of the children, the overall fear of the entire community of Barbados. I was in the supermarket when I received the call at 10:15 yesterday morning saying there's an incident at Springer School. And I put on my phone, I start making other phone calls, trying to figure out, because before I jump on something, I like to make sure, okay, what's really happening, is really true, because I'm saying, I really hope to God that this person misunderstood what they were hearing, that they misunderstood the whole situation. Then to hear, yes, something is really happening at this school, then what? Then what? An apology is not enough at this stage. We've passed apology stage. We've really passed that stage. Do we know the difference between what is a drill and what is a simulation? Did we have drills first? The drill will teach people what to do in a situation, where students taught what to do if some person entered the compound, where students given directions on what is a code red, what is a code orange, what is a code blue. Did we do these things beforehand? Before we push a full-on simulation, like I said, which is different from a drill, full-on simulation on children that are not ready. A lot of these students, like a parent said, this don't happen at home. My child is not in this environment. My child has not experienced this. But then you're going to put these children in that situation and then talk about, oh, we'll give you counseling. Counseling to help you overcome all of that. Counseling for how long? Counseling just for the students. The parents need counseling too. Some of the teachers need counseling too. Everybody, I myself right now, I feel if I need counseling too. And I'm serious about this because I feel this in a place that I don't feel good about the situation. I don't think anybody should feel good about the situation. And like I said, this situation is not a situation with excuses. I had a list of things here to talk about in terms of the conventions to the rights of the child and all that kind of thing, but this situation is too emotional for me to even get into all of this. It's point blank, something that should not have happened. And I heard, the chief education officer talking about it was just a drill. Yesterday when they listened to the news, because they really wanted to know, okay, what's really happening, it was just a drill and there's no need to worry. Just? When you repeat that again for me, it was what? Just a drill? You put my whole life at risk because somebody could have dropped me with a heart attack. You had people that had panic attacks, all kind of things. Imagine now a child probably would have had a situation at home before and probably had a weapon. Or get the hand close to a car in a Belgian part, not a rock stone. And they lick a rock in somebody's head when he made that with it and kill that person. Was it going to be just a drill? Would have this child been charged? Like, did we take this fully through to the next level? This government, we've realized, have a problem with implementation. They have great ideas. Lovely. Have a simulation, but no. Maybe you have a drill. But then let's follow this through to the end and see what could have really occurred if a child was wielding a weapon and decided to fight. Because now you are in fight or flight mode. What should I do in this situation? I can fight because I want to try to save my life. And they had a rock and they hit someone in the back of the head trying to get away to save my life. Then here, it was just a drill. And again, you walk back government, because then the same chief educational officer had to come back to say, oh, she's now feeling, she's giving empathy to the situation. It's too late for that now. Too late. It is too late for that. So then my question is now, where do we go from here? Where do we really go from here? Security in the schools, still not up to par. And if, like I said, if you want to do drills, please. Even big adults, when you work in a business, you have pre-education before you have drills, before you have simulations. They tell you what to do. When you hear the bell, this is what you do. This is where you go. This is who's in charge. Come on, are we educated? But my grandmother always said, education is not common sense. And it is clear in this situation. So where do we go from here? Where do we go? I was told the police and the fire were involved again. If that is true, I'm disappointed in the police. I'm disappointed in the fire department because they should know better. They should know better. So I don't want to spend much more time on this, but parents, just know we're here for you. If you're not getting the necessary counseling that you need, I'm sure we'll be able to offer you some kind of help, some kind of counseling. If you need legal assistance, you can reach out to us, and for your students and for your children and your wards also. So, Madam Chairperson, back over to you.
Thanks very much, Comrade Melissa Stavery Gittins. I just want to inform our viewers at this time that there was also another press conference called, as I think was referenced by Comrade Dujon, and I would like to make it public that the Democratic Labour Party shared news of its press conference last night. The government of this country shared news of their press conference this morning. But it doesn't matter how much public relations is engaged in at this time. It doesn't matter how much theater is engaged in this morning at the Ministry of Education. Let it be very clear that what happened yesterday was unforgivable, and the Democratic Labour Party will always stand in the breach when violations of this sort occur, especially amongst its women and its children, and understand that this time around, and we're going to repeat it all morning, there are no apologies. As a victim of a violent crime myself, a robbery, the trauma lasts a very long time. Sometimes it never goes away. And all of us had a visceral reaction to the videos we saw of the happenings at Springer Memorial School yesterday, but specifically those of us who have experienced a crime, we too were traumatized, because you feel the emotion every time you see things like this happening, and to see it happening to our children makes it all the more difficult and all the more unpalatable. Time and time again, this Ministry of Education has shown us that our children are not safe in their hands. And I would wish to know what more will it take for the Prime Minister of this country to ask Kay McConney and her surrogates to pack their bags and go, because we're not comfortable with them taking care of our children. We have research here which we would like to share with you today, which shows that you don't have to reinvent the wheel to do the right thing. Google is right there. There are all types of educational sites which can guide you when you wish to simulate, when you wish to do anything on God's earth. And it is beyond the imagination why our officials could not have used the tools at their fingertips to do the right thing. So what we're going to do is educate Barbadians this morning so that they understand that what happened was bungling, and it was unforgivable bungling.
Thank you, Comrade. The reality is that when we tend to design policies, the majority of times we look at assumptions. We do not look at empirical evidence to support whatever policies that we want to implement. A lot of persons in the public have made statements that we need to teach children how to respond and how to respond to various types of simulations within their own environment. We want to ask those same individuals, what is the research have said on those same simulations and drills? What does it say? The reality is that many scientific and medical journals are now telling us that after those drills, those that you have been seeing in the US, after those drills, that there have been an increase in anxiety, stress, and depression from 39 to 42% in children. So we know what that means. We are facing the increase of mental health conditions of children when we inflict those traumatic experiences on them. The reality is that also we have to think in terms of the various types of injuries that have occurred during those simulations. And how do those medical professionals, and of course we know about the hospital right now. We can almost imagine the chaos that existed when families had to bring their children, or teachers had to seek medical attention as to what occurred yesterday. So the reality is that, are we saying as a society that we must traumatize our children to teach them a lesson? That we must use violence so that they know how to respond? Do we know the background of some of those children? Do we know that any of those children may be already living in violent homes and communities, and the only safe space that they have is the schools? And what do? We are going to further increase fear and violence in these same spaces? Do we care about the mental health of our children? How much more do our children have to take? Because the reality is that we're saying that, well, you know, it's just a drill, so it wouldn't affect them. Children are human beings. They are thinking beings. They have emotions. They have fears. They have concerns. And we as adults are responsible to ensure that they are safe. How do you think those children feel this morning going back into that same environment? How do you think they feel? How do you think that parents feel this morning, sending those children back in that same traumatic experience, that environment that they came from? So the reality is that when we do our research, and I would advise those policymakers that when you're designing policies, conduct your empirical evidence to support your claims and your position. Because this is not what the evidence is telling us. It does not work. It does not work for children. If it doesn't work for adults, do you think it's going to work for children? When their cognitive behaviors have not even been fully developed? The drills that have been designed, they have been designed by policemen. These are trained professionals. And some of those drills does not incorporate social and emotional issues. It does not incorporate it. So it's very alarming that we are being told that the police and the fire service were involved. These are trained professionals within their fields. These are not individuals they just took from the streets. They are trained to deal with such hostile environments. And we're placing our children, the innocence of our children, in harm's way. So we must stop with the assumptions and deal with things the way that we have to deal with it. As a society that is developed, a society that is reflective on children's rights and parental rights. Once again, we are discussing the issues of parental rights that is being trampled, that is being infringed by the same government which trampled on those rights of parents in 2022, October, almost a year ago, October 22, when we had to deal with the IDB matter, where the state felt it was in the best interest of children to take a survey without the consent of the parents. And they're doing the exact situation in this case again. Disregard, a total disregard of parental rights. And are claiming that it is in the best interest of the children that we can send two armed men with weapons to traumatize our children. How is that ever in the best interest of our children? Tell me, how is it in the best interest of our children that we can traumatize them with violence and assume and believe that it is an unethical thing to do? It was an unethical practice, and we believe that everyone who participated should be reprimanded. These are our children, and we need to stand up for them. Too often we disregard the concerns of our children. We heard the children on television. We saw them. We heard their fears. We saw their raw emotions. And as any parent, we can understand we would have wanted to be there to safeguard our children. If we can't safeguard our children from the ministry that claims to save our children, who are we leaving our children for? Who? The ministry that's supposed to protect them are having armed men come on the property to terrorize our children. What do we think about that? So the reality is that what the Ministry of Education ought to do is to ensure that they implement good strategies for security on school compounds. Do not use our children as guinea pigs for security measures. Do not use the mental state, mental health of our children for your incompetence to ensure that you can include the various types of safety strategies within schools. This is what is required. Do we need more security? Do we need to put more fencing, more security cameras? But no, somebody thought it was a better idea to use the children because they are not human beings. These are the realities that we have to deal with. And we again are going to call on the Ministry of Education that we know that you will come with your apology, but at this stage, we do understand as human beings that we make error, but something else that we do understand, that for every error that you make, there are consequences to your actions. And that consequence is that we will expect your immediate resignation, because parents could no longer trust this government with the safety of their children. Thank you.
I just want to ask one question, Irene. Is this a part, and this is to the government, the Ministry of Education, is this a part of the new education reform?
No.
Reimagining education in Barbados, a bright future for every child? Is this a part of what we are supposed to expect in the future for our children? I just want to ask that question.
I do not know why Comrade Savory would ask me that question. I don't think I look like the Minister of Education, far from. So I think your question is misdirected. And probably at some point you will have the opportunity to ask that question directly of the person responsible. And I keep saying the person responsible because I know there will be a strategy to throw the school under the bus. The head teacher is going to take responsibility because it is her school. You're going to hear the ministry telling Barbadians that schools are autonomous and that the Ministry of Education had no hand in the whole affair. So like Pontius Pilate, they will wash their hands clean. But they have to understand that in the Education Act of this country, all roads lead to the Minister of Education. Furthermore, to admit that you are not responsible is even more egregious because you have to be able to have a template for these types of exercises. All schools should have a particular template so that you control the environment. That is common sense. Basic principles that all schools follow so that there are no deviations from the template or the blueprint of these exercises. In that way, you assure us of the safety of our children because you are aware of what is happening and you are in charge and you make sure that they are safe. So if you're going to say that you knew nothing and that the schools are responsible and every school has its own methodology for these types of exercises, again, you shouldn't be there. Why are you here? Why are you there? You need to go. You've had enough chances. Pretty talk no longer matters. You just need to go. Are there any more contributions?
Yes.
No.
I would just like to add to what you were saying, Comrade. The Education Act, Chapter 41 of the Laws of Barbados, specifically state that it is the minister's responsibility in governing the actions of these schools, public schools in Barbados. So it's not a good enough excuse to try to throw the principal under the bus because everything goes through you. You are the head. You have to control your ministry. You have to control your delegates. It's not good enough. It's not good enough of an excuse. And I would like to implore those parents out there, please take legal action. The time is now. Take legal action. Stand up for the rights of your children. Protect your children at all costs necessary.
But if I may add, in terms of the leadership, and that is always the question that we have, that when it comes to such policies, we see very much in the IDB matter, we've seen that leaders come in and say, well, we just have to apologize and move on. The reality is that the Education Act tells you different. When there is a breach, there are procedures. And the procedure is that the minister is held accountable, or anyone who violates the rights of children are held accountable. It's also very alarming that the Child Care Board has not said a word on this matter, because we're dealing with children's rights. We're dealing with the violations of children's rights, and we have not heard an entity that is responsible for the safekeeping and safeguarding of children, have not made a comment, because again, it is left in the hands of the Ministry of Education. So it speaks volumes about the leadership of this government, the leadership of this administration, that at any point in time, they can step in and change the rules, or they may step in and breach the laws of Barbados. And when that happens, we as citizens have to hold them accountable. Because the reality is, when those breaches do occur, there's no procedure, there's no accountability, there's no transparency. So it is brushed under the table and we never hear about it again. So the reality is that 1 year later, we have this matter. What is going to happen? They're going to come out, have another meeting, apologize, and we move on. We need to have good governance and good leadership within this country. It is about time that we understand that in every good governing country, that the leadership is paramount in terms of how you govern, and you govern well, and do not govern as tyrants. The reality is, again, when you have individuals who ensure that the safekeeping of children and they cannot manage their portfolio, what do you do? So this is also a matter of leadership and how those persons that are placed in the position that they are placed, are they ensuring that they are doing their job and they are doing it ethically and they're doing it in the way that is transparent and holds some kind of accountability. So the leadership is very concerning in terms that we have to be coming back to the public domain, begging, literally begging the Prime Minister to do something. We can no longer allow this kind of behavior. We can no longer allow this kind of conduct. There are procedures, there are laws, and once it is breached, we must ensure that persons are held accountable.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Comrade Sabrigadens? No? All right. Members of the media who are here, do you have anything you would wish to ask us? 3 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Trey from the Nation. Forgive me if this question was answered already, but could you give us an update in regards to the litigation with the IDB survey? It's been a year. I'm not sure if you specifically were still.
Well, the IDB matter that occurred exactly a year ago, if we have to take things into perspective, the parents did reach out to their legal attorney, and the process is still ongoing. So they have written, if I may share, they have written to the Ministry of Education, and so this matter is in the courts. This matter will be proceeding. A legal lawsuit is proceeding, and as my comrade Trotman has indicated, parents, you do have a legal right. You do not only have what they call responsibility, because people think that you just have a responsibility. You have a legal right. So parents have a legal right to seek legal counsel on this matter, because a breach has occurred and a breach needs to be addressed. So yes, they need to consider that matter as well.
Okay, firstly, I can clarify that involved individual would not have been the Barbados Fire Service. It was the Barbados Defense Force and the police, just to put that clear there. And then, in terms of physical injuries that would have been sustained by both teachers, staff, and children, do we know how this is going to be paid for? Was that a question anybody's asking?
Well, it's a good question, and as I said before, any harm that is being done to children, and what I want us to look at as a society is stop looking at physical harm as the only form of harm that a human being can get. psychological harm is just as detrimental as physical harm. So yes, you're concerned that children will be getting counseling, but some children may not speak 10 years later. Trauma, it's very personalized, and so you will find that parents will have to reach out to the various psychiatric care in some cases, and that is one of the reasons why they need to seek legal advice, because the attorney, whichever attorney will deal with the matter, will be able to tell them as to what the process is, it would be.
Yes, I'll just add to that from a legal standpoint, because I am a legal practitioner myself. Not only was it a criminal action, but there's a civil side to it as well. It's trite law once again. We have the principle of Donahue against Stevenson. Anywhere where there's a duty of care, where a duty of care has been established, and there has been a breach of that duty of care. And as a result of that breach, there's been injury, whether it be physical, mental, you have a right, you have a case, you have a cause of action. So without saying too much, that would be the road that parents should take. The first step would be to go to seek counseling, so you can rely on medical evidence, and thereafter retain an attorney at law to represent your interests.
Is anybody surprised that the school was not closed today?
I am surprised. I think we're all surprised.
Yes, we are. Again, we do not take mental health serious in this country. We do not take mental health serious, and we're seeing how the numbers of suicides within our country as well, how it seem to develop rapidly in some cases. For such a traumatic experience to happen, and then everyone who goes back to the school as if we should go back to normal, the normality in it speaks volumes. It speaks about how we think about mental health, the trauma that those children experienced, and what makes it worse is that they do not consider that being in the environment may trigger other types of psychological illness or psychological imbalances. It's a trauma, and it could be triggering for some children. So every child should have given the opportunity. Perhaps what they should have done is to resume school on Monday and allow parents and everybody else to at least settle down, get whatever intervention that is needed, and try to restructure in such a way. But immediately after, it tells you how those responsible think about the health care, the mental health care of the children itself. What's about the children who cannot make it because of physical injury? What's about them? Would they miss out on anything in class today? What is the state of being for those children? Being in a state, I'm a teacher myself, and I don't know how I would feel to return to a classroom and teach, knowing that a few men almost tried to run us down with some knives or whatever, Collins or whatever. The mental impact is very important. A learning environment should be a safe environment, not a place where I can go and feel some element of fear. And I think it's very important, as I said before, it shows us how we reduces the human experience, because that was a real experience for those children, and to tell them to go back to school the next day really tells us how they really think about our own children.
Okay, so I just want to put two things on the table. One, yesterday was the International Day of the Girl Child, and this is World Mental Health Month, so it happened also one day after World Mental Health Day. But the question that I have is, even if in the planning there were things that were missed, I don't know if you realize, but there were two simulations yesterday. One was chalk and one was cheese. Because for 2 weeks, you have been seeing ads and notices running about one of those simulation exercises to let you know a simulation will happen. You will never know the date, you will never know the time, but you had those notices. When that simulation exercise began, you also got a notice saying simulation has gone live. That was also done in that scenario. We had two simulations using emergency responders. Barbados is always complaining about needing more emergency responders. Yesterday, the country was very open in the sense that you had emergency responders at one simulation, not even knowing about a second simulation. For me, I just want to know if you had to say where you think the ball was dropped, besides in terms of the minister, in the planning, in the process, if you had to say where you believe the ball was dropped, what would you say?
To me, the ball would have been initially dropped in the planning phase. Because in order to get to the point of actually having a simulation, you would have had, I would assume, you would have had to have some kind of planning. So if it was missed in the planning, then it would be missed on the day, unless there's somebody with active coordination on the day to realize, you know what, at what stage do we say, okay, this is not going how it was initially planned, let's stop this for now and resume it at a later date when we have come back together and replanned, when we realize this is not going well. When you're hearing the screams of children, when you are seeing the panic, when did we say, let's stop and do this another time? Let's stop and see where we've gone wrong and plan again for the future. So in my estimation, the ball was dropped in the planning. And to answer your question before in terms of school being reopened today, if you were being abused in a situation or a location, every time you go back to that location, that's going to give you some kind of mental trigger. So if you were robbed, I don't know, in a bank, from the time you step at that door, that can come flooding back to your memory and put you in a state of panic. For some people freeze. They don't know what to do, how to handle it. Did we even think about that when we resumed school today as business as usual? And in most cases, to the abuser, doesn't realize, you know, for them, that abuse is nothing. So in a situation like this, I think, again, we have people who are educated but are not using common sense. We have lots of consultants. What are they doing? And I'm saying, like, at which stage, again, does somebody say, because you don't have all the ideas, because I'm not saying I have all, but at which stage I can say, Madam Chair, Tyra, you know, I ain't like what you're doing. What you're doing ain't making no sense. At which stage can somebody tell the next person, this plan is not going to work? At which stage? How many people did this? Was it one person that planned the whole thing and executed it on their own? Because if not, somebody should be able to say, this is not right, this is not going to work, let's pull this back, let's stop this. And it doesn't seem like any of that would have been done.
If I could just add, for me, I think the ball was dropped, as Comrade Melissa said, from the inception, from the planning and the preparation. Because at the end of the day, you cannot have a simulation without preparing the persons involved in how they should respond or react to the events which will occur. So that's why you will find there was a situation where instead of there being orderly instructions, or like, for example, this is the meeting point, this is how we're going to, instead of everybody just rushing out through the door, we're going to assimilate, we're going to go in lines, in rows, whatever the case may be. We had students just rushing, going through the doors to a point where, I believe is my information, that a student was trampled and received several broken bones and injuries. So you put students in a dangerous situation because of lack of preparation and planning. So I think the ball was dropped from the very inception. I think that there should have been drills. As Comrade Melissa said, there's a difference between drills and then an actual simulation. There should have been knowledge, there should have been notification, and most importantly, there should have been consent of the parents.
Thank you. Comrade Trotman, any more contributions?
I just feel that it's about time that the ministry and whoever is responsible, and I heard most of the discussion from various bodies, parental bodies and secondary school bodies. The justification that is being used, it's quite unethical. We are justifying that, yes, we should have traumatized our children because we're teaching them. We're teaching them how to protect themselves. And as I said before, there's no empirical data to show otherwise. Medical science journals, none of them shows that this has worked. So the reality is that our justifications as adults to use children and traumatize them, it's really something that we as adults have to think about, because we believe that abuse is only when a parent, we couldn't only imagine a parent trying to teach a child how to keep safe and the parent decides to take a Collins and run behind the child. That parent would have been locked up. So the reality is that we need to learn how to be more humane to our children, to treat our children with respect and treat them with dignity. Because I can't imagine any reasonable and sensible human being would think it is acceptable to run behind children with Collins and think that is acceptable. It is not acceptable. And I think in any democratic and any developed state where people do these things and believe that it can get away with it, I think it's unacceptable. And I think we have to put the blame where it exactly is. It's not the children, it's not the parents. We need to stop victim blaming the persons that have been the victims of ill-developed policies. The perpetrators who violated the rights of parents and children are also having a press conference this morning. This is where the fingers should be pointed at. And this is where we need to ensure that no form of justification can justify what was done to those children.
Thank you, Comrade Dujon. Are there any more questions from the media?
Yeah, I just have one more question. It's also been a week since they officially announced the education reform proposals, including the abolishment of the common entrance, introducing the academies of excellence. I'm not sure if anyone wanted to give their take on those plans. Sorry, I was saying it's been a week since the government officially spoke about their plans for the education reform, including the getting rid of the 11+, the academies of excellence. So I was checking to see if anyone wanted to give their take on some of those plans and how it, again, would impact children.
So the theatric meeting that was held last week to announce the plans, say it again, the theatric meeting that was held last week. In my mind, you know, when we did take a look at it, and again, the government is putting the cart before the horse. We are talking about abolishing the 11+, but what is the plan? So the proposals were very, what's the word I want to use? Just flat. There was nothing about the proposal. The proposal did not go into detail what it would include and how it would be done. So there was really nothing solid that you can work with to determine a number of issues. Like I said earlier, we still have an issue at the schools where security is a problem. You can walk into any school right now, try it and tell me if it worked. We still have problems in schools where children are not receiving, school meals are still coming late. Parents call again complaining about school meals coming late. We still have the situation where we had the learning loss of students during COVID that has not been addressed. And I can go on and on and on about these things. How are we reforming education when we have not even addressed the basic of things? And we need to address, I'm not saying that education reform is not necessary because it very much is, but we need to address these other issues first before we talk about reforming education by 2025. We can't get schools ready in time for a timely restart after summer. So things like this. So yes, education reform is necessary, but again, we need more details in terms of the proposal and not just blanket statements. How are you going to do this? What are your timelines? Page 29 had a roadmap, and the roadmap is still not complete because all the things that are in the roadmap is still not clear and complete. So again, education reform necessary, but we need more details, and we agree it must happen, but how is it going to happen, and how will it impact, again, these same children? Because if this is done and not done correctly, we're going to have a worse situation in our hands. If we have a reenactment of edutech, we're going to have a worse situation in our hand. EduTech was only 20 schools, and we're looking to reform an entire education system for our entire country. We need to do this and do this properly. Like I mentioned before, I spoke about having a test school where you can run an example of what this will look like, test it out, see how it works before implementing it across the country, because if you do it on a wide scale and it doesn't work, we're going to have catastrophe. Yeah. Yes. And again, thank you for your question. And the question, and for those who didn't hear it, was in terms of things being rushed. And I wouldn't say that they're rushed, but when they realize, when the Ministry of Education realized that people are complaining because they weren't a part of the process, let me try and get something done quickly so that it looks like if you were a part of the process. When, in my mind, the process is already complete. They already know what they want to do. And they're just doing the back work so it can look like if you were a part of the process, when truthfully you weren't. You weren't a part of the process. And consultation needs to be continuous. And as you change things, I heard a teacher say to me, you know, we were consulted, but when the theatric meeting was held last week, we weren't aware. So we did have a meeting, but did they come back to us and say this is what they're going to do for us to have a further input to say, no, that's not going to work, no, that doesn't make sense. It was just, all right, I meet with you, this is what we're going to do, and move on. When a lot of the stuff that they would have proposed was not even in the proposal, which means that, like I said, the proposal was done beforehand. And I'm just meeting with you out of respect to say, to tick a box to say, I met with you.
The Democratic Labour Party will provide the public with our proposal on what has been shared. We did not engage in any consultation with the government, and so at this point we will leave that where it is, so that when we get to go for the entire proposal, we'll look into that. But the other question that we should ask ourselves, are these the same type of persons that we want to run an educational reform in this country? Given what they have done to our children from last year to this point, would parents be able to trust this Ministry of Education again? We have had a trust issue before, and now this has occurred. How can we trust those same individuals to enact or to implement any educational reform? The reality is that education is not only about academics. It is about building the holistic person or individual. And this is what they're saying that the reform should do. But if you do not take in consideration the mental health of children, how can you reform them? How can you reform a child that was traumatized under your leadership? Because you're primarily thinking about academics. Academics is not all in what you need to reform or to develop a Barbadian student. A Barbadian student needs the academic, but it also needs to know that it's in a safe environment and it actually have people that care about their interest and their development and their future. So no, even if we have an educational policy, the individuals that are in the leadership positions right now, the CEO and the Minister of Education, I don't think that they are competent enough to have the holistic, well-grounded, well-spirited individual or Barbadian student. Because we do not want a student to be academically inclined, yes, suffer from mental health issues that they gained during the educational development. So these are the kinds of concerns that we need to have. When you speak about education, we're not only speaking about academics, we're speaking about the individual. How do you want to develop that individual so that this person can function adequately within our society? We do not want our citizens to be walking around with mental health issues that we inflicted upon them when they were young.
These are the kinds of questions that we need to ask when we're asking those individuals, when you are charged with the responsibility of taking care of children, you give them your utmost. And that comes from whoever is given the most, there's a higher expectation. Much as if it's given, as much is expected. And so for that, we ensure again, there's a problem with the leadership of this government. And this is what we are concerned about. So in as much as they can roll out all educational policies, the concern is how they deal with those policies and how those individuals think about the average Barbadian and the average Barbadian student. Because if you love those children, you would have never have some wild men running behind them with Collins.
Well, that is an excellent note to end this press conference on. I would urge all of our viewers to share this video far and wide, because the contents of it will not be seen on national television, nor will you hear us on national radio. So it is your duty to share and share widely. On the topic of leadership, I would like to conclude with a piece of sympathy, a bit of empathy, because we are speaking about the children, we've spoken about the teachers. This morning, I think we also should think about the head teacher, who I'm sure is a bundle of nerves at that press conference, because she's a victim as well, a victim of maladministration, a victim of a ministry which has left her out there on a dinghy in a sea of sharks. And she will be pilloried by those who don't know better. So let's just spare a moment for her as well, because I'm sure that this cannot be an easy day for her as a head teacher. I'm sure she was well-intentioned, and let it not be said that we are pillaring her, because we understand she's a victim of poor leadership. To this day, her boss has not come forward and said a word on this matter. The boss's surrogate, her supervisor, is with her this afternoon. And they're out there alone, while the Minister of Education is hiding. But you can't hide forever. And every time there is a bungle, every time the ball is dropped, every road will lead back to this Minister of Education, who has shown us that our children are not safe under her leadership. And she needs to go. We do not know what it will take for the Prime Minister to make a decision, but understand the longer you take, the longer you disrespect the people of Barbados and the parents of children who do not feel comfortable taking their children to government institutions, because they do not know what is in store for them when the day comes when their children are left in the care of this government and this ministry. Because all policies, as I said, should be vetted. All simulations should have had a blueprint. There is a government for that. The teachers are also employees, and they need a break today. And I feel for the teachers who have to go back to the school today, because some of them were traumatized. We saw them, we heard them. And they have to search deep within themselves and ask themselves if this is a Ministry of Education they feel comfortable with. Is this governance that they feel comfortable with? We as Bajans do not feel comfortable. Today we have expressed what Barbadians feel. We've expressed how the children feel. And we are hoping that the Prime Minister understands how the country feels and she makes the right decision. Thank you.